The desert was silent. Only the wind whispered across the golden dunes. But beneath that silence, Egypt was alive, a kingdom of gods and warriors, of kings who ruled like living deities, and of wars that forged the greatest civilization the world had ever seen. This is the story of the pharaohs at war, how Egypt rose from the sands to dominate the ancient world. Thousands of years ago, when other nations were barely tribes, Egypt stood tall. The Nile River was its heartbeat, its people the pulse of eternity. But peace never lasted long in a world ruled by ambition. To the east lay Canaan and the rising powers of Mesopotamia. To the north, the Hittites, fierce and hungry for land. To the south, Nubia, proud and defiant. And in the heart of it all, the pharaohs, crowned with gold, believed they were chosen by the gods themselves to conquer, to rule, to become immortal. Our story begins with a young king, Thutmose III, a warrior not by birth, but by destiny. He inherited a throne overshadowed by his stepmother, Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's few female rulers. For years he waited, watched, learned, and when his time finally came, he unleashed a storm that changed history forever. It was the year 1457 BCE. The city of Megiddo stood as a stronghold for rebels in Canaan. The enemy had united more than 300 local princes, armies from Syria, and mercenaries from distant lands, all ready to defy Egypt's rule. Thutmose marched north with 20,000 men, crossing deserts and mountains. 3 roads led to Megiddo, 2 were safe, 1 was narrow, dangerous, perfect for an ambush. His generals begged him not to take it, but Thutmose smiled and said, "The brave follow the path the coward fears." He chose the dangerous road. His chariots thundered through the narrow pass, and when the enemy realized what he had done, it was too late. The Egyptians burst onto the plains of Megiddo like a storm from the gods. The enemy broke ranks. Horses trampled men, bronze swords clashed, and dust filled the air. The rebels fled behind the walls of the city, but in their panic, they left behind their royal tents, their treasures, and even the royal chariots. The battle was won, but the siege lasted months, and when the city finally fell, Egypt had secured its dominance over the Near East. Thutmose III wasn't just a king anymore, he was a legend. He built temples, expanded borders, and filled Egypt's treasury with gold, slaves, and tribute from every conquered land. The pharaoh had become not just a ruler but a god of war. But centuries later, Egypt's glory faced its greatest challenge. A foreign race known as the Hyksos had invaded from the north. They brought new weapons, horse-drawn chariots, composite bows, and iron blades. Egypt had never seen such power before. The mighty land of the pharaohs was brought to its knees. The Hyksos ruled Egypt for nearly a century, and the once divine kings were reduced to exiles in their own land. But one man refused to bow. Thutmose I. He was young, fiery, and determined to restore Egypt's honor. He rebuilt the army, learned the art of war from the invaders themselves, and turned their own weapons against them. The final siege came at Avaris, the Hyksos capital in the delta. The Nile ran red that day. Egyptian chariots stormed through the city gates, fire spread across the walls, and the cries of the fallen echoed into the desert night. When the sun rose again, the Hyksos were gone, and Egypt was reborn. Thutmose I founded the new kingdom, the Age of Empire. The pharaohs were no longer just kings, they were emperors ruling lands from Nubia to Syria. Then came Ramses II, the pharaoh of pharaohs, the builder of temples, the father of legacies, the warrior who fought not just for power, but for immortality. His name still echoes across the temples of Abu Simbel, carved deep into the rock as if daring time to erase him. But his greatest test came at Kadesh. It was 1274 BCE. Egypt faced its rival, the mighty Hittite Empire. Both nations wanted control of Syria, the bridge between Africa and Asia, the key to trade, wealth, and influence. Ramses marched north with his army for divisions of chariots, each named after the gods, Amen, Ra, Ptah, and Set. But the Hittites were ready. Their king, Muwatalli II, had planned an ambush. The Egyptian scouts were tricked by false spies. Ramses rode ahead with only his Amen division, and suddenly, chaos exploded around him. Thousands of Hittite chariots charged out of hiding, their wheels tearing through the dust. Ramses was surrounded. His men were dying. Even the gods seemed silent. But the pharaoh refused to run. He stood in his chariot, raised his bow, and shouted to the heavens, "I am Ramses, beloved of Amen. No one shall stand before me." And then, as if the gods answered, reinforcements from the Ptah division arrived. The battle turned. Arrows filled the sky, chariots crashed, and the Hittites fell back. Neither side truly won that day, but Ramses declared victory to his people and carved his triumph into every temple wall from Luxor to Karnak. It wasn't just a battle, it was a performance of divine power. Ramses became immortal in stone, his story told for eternity. Yet Egypt's enemies never rested. From the sea came new invaders, strange warriors from unknown lands. The Egyptians called them the Sea Peoples. They came in massive ships, raiding ports, burning cities, devouring entire kingdoms. No empire had survived their fury until they reached Egypt. It was now the reign of Ramses III, the last great warrior king. The year was 1175 BCE. The Nile Delta turned into a battlefield once again. Ramses prepared traps along the riverbanks, archers hidden behind walls, ships lined in perfect formation. When the sea peoples attacked, they were caught in a storm of arrows. Egyptian fireships rammed their fleets, while soldiers on the shore finished what the Nile began. Ramses III crushed them. It was Egypt's last great victory. But even as he celebrated, darkness was coming. The wars had drained Egypt's wealth. Famine spread. Temples were looted. The once divine pharaohs were now shadows of their ancestors. The empire that had once ruled the known world began to crumble, not from invaders but from within. Yet their legacy refused to die. For every temple they built, every battle they fought, every scar written on stone, all told one story, that Egypt's kings were more than men. They were living gods, born of the desert and shaped by war. Today, thousands of years later, when you walk through the ruins of Thebes or gaze at the colossal statues of Abu Simbel, you can still feel their presence. The whispers of their conquests echo in the stones. The silence of the pyramids hides the roars of their victories. Because Egypt was never just a land, it was an idea. The idea that man could reach for eternity and almost touch it. The pharaohs fought not just to win wars but to fight time itself. Their enemies have turned to dust, their empires forgotten, but Egypt still stands. The Nile still flows, the temples still rise, and the names of its warrior kings, Thutmose, Amos, Ramses, still command awe. They built monuments that defied death. They carved their victories in stone because they knew time forgets the weak, but remembers the conquerors. So when you look upon the golden mask of a pharaoh, remember behind that serene face was a warrior, a strategist, a man who believed he carried the power of the gods. Their wars were brutal, their empires vast, and their legacy eternal. This was how Egypt dominated the ancient world, not through peace, but through power, vision, and the unshakable belief that the divine lived in them. Their story didn't end in the desert sands. It lives on in history, in legend, in the whispers of eternity. Because when the world remembers power, it remembers Egypt. And when it remembers Egypt, it remembers the pharaohs, the warrior gods of the ancient world.